Officer Dana Prentice fastened the second zip tie at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday in front of 11 people standing outside the Chevron station on West Florissant Avenue in North St. Louis. She did not need to. The man's hands had been at his sides the entire time, and two of her colleagues had already confirmed he matched nothing in the description they had been given. She fastened the second zip tie anyway, cinched it past the click, and then turned to the woman standing behind her and said something that made three people in the crowd look away, and one person quietly raise a phone. The man did not respond. He sat down on the curb in the gravel at the edge of the parking lot, in the dark space between the light post and the trash can, and he looked at the strip of concrete between his shoes. His breathing did not change. He had a leather folio on the ground beside him, dark brown, worn at the corners. The kind of thing that gets engraved when someone has done something worth commemorating, and when Officer Prentice kicked it with the side of her boot so it slid 3 feet down the curb and into the gravel. He watched it go without turning his head the whole way. He did not know that the woman filming from the gray Honda Civic at Pump 4 was already uploading. He did not know that the man inside the Chevron, who had been watching through the glass for the last 7 minutes, had already reached for his phone. But in a city of 300,000 people, some things that begin on a curb do not stay there. His name was Tobena Achebe. He was 44 years old. He wore a navy wool blazer over a white Oxford shirt, both from a tailor on Sutton Avenue in the Maplewood neighborhood, where he had been a regular customer for 11 years. The shirt had been ironed that morning. He kept a handkerchief in his left breast pocket, folded the way his father had taught him in Enugu before the family left. One fold down the center, one fold across, tucked so the white edge showed exactly 1 centimeter above the pocket. The ritual took him roughly 40 seconds each morning, and he had not stopped doing it since his father died in February 2014 in a hospital bed on the 3rd floor of Barnes Jewish Medical Center, with Tobena's hand on his forearm and a monitor beeping a rhythm that Tobena would hear for 3 years afterward in the quiet of his apartment. He was 6 feet 1 inch tall and had lost 17 pounds since January, not because of illness but because he had been eating once a day for reasons that had nothing to do with appetite and everything to do with the kind of grief that doesn't announce itself. He ate standing at the kitchen counter, usually around 9 p.m., whatever he had bought in the morning from the small Nigerian restaurant on Delmar Boulevard, rice or yam or occasionally the pepper soup the owner started bringing, without being asked after the 3rd or 4th week she noticed, he always ordered alone. He was not unhealthy. He was occupied. The leather folio in the gravel held 2 things. The first was a signed summary of the Meridian District Compliance Review, 140 pages, 9 months of work, due to the city's Department of Administrative Oversight by 10 a.m. the following Friday morning. The second was a photograph of a girl, 8 years old, in a yellow dress at a birthday party in a backyard in University City, taken on a Saturday in June 2009. The photograph was not in a sleeve. It was loose inside the folio, between the last section and the back cover, the way you keep something you look at often enough that you no longer need to protect it from strangers. Tobena had pulled into the Chevron at 9:31 p.m. for a bottle of water and a pack of the peppermint gum he kept in the cup holder. He was 2.4 miles from his apartment. He had been in the car since 6:15 that morning, driving between the Hall Street Records Archive in downtown and the 3rd Precinct's administrative annex on Kingshire Way, and he had not stopped except for gas. The call had come in at 9:34 p.m., 2 minutes after he walked back out to the parking lot, a neighbor reporting a suspicious man sitting in a dark vehicle behind the station. His vehicle was gray. He had been parked in a designated space directly under the Chevron canopy lighting, clearly visible from West Florissant, for 4 minutes. Officer Prentice arrived at 9:38 with one partner, Officer Rick Holton, who stood 6 feet back for the entirety of what followed with his arms folded and his weight on his rear foot. She had been on the force for 6 years. She had 14 use of force reports in that period, a number that appeared twice in her internal precinct file and had been acted upon 0 times. She was 31 years old. She had a laminated photograph of her niece on the dashboard of her unit vehicle, a yellow sticky note on the glove compartment that read Tuesday, dentist, and a habit of looking at hands before faces. She looked at Tobena's hands, then at the folio, then made a decision. She asked him 3 questions. He answered all 3 clearly and without raising his voice. He provided his license and registration before she asked for them. He explained in 2 sentences that he was a city contractor on his way home from an archive visit, and that the document bag on the seat was work material. By the time he had finished the 2nd sentence, Officer Prentice had already reached for the zip ties on her belt. The 11 people watching included Marcel Dupuis at Pump 4, a recording already running, a man in a white F-150 who turned off his engine, 2 teenagers near the air machine who had stopped moving entirely, one with a hand raised halfway to his mouth, a woman with a grocery bag in each hand who put the bags on the ground and stood straight. Curtis Beaumont watching through the glass. Nobody spoke. The light above Pump 4 buzzed in the 61-degree air, a continuous irritated hum that the maintenance service had promised to address 11 days ago and hadn't. There was one man near the entrance of the station, around 40, in a gray hoodie, who had his phone out and watched the whole thing from the moment the 2nd zip tie went on. He did not film. He looked at his screen once, opened an app, looked at it for 4 seconds, closed it, and then looked back at the scene, and then walked to his car and drove off the lot heading south before the cruiser had been parked for 2 minutes. He had a phone in his pocket with a camera. He had 11 people around him doing what people do when they witness something wrong. He chose to leave, which is its own kind of testimony about what people have learned to expect from getting involved in North St. Louis on a Thursday night in a Chevron parking lot. A man named Curtis Beaumont managed this station. He was 61 years old, had worked the same location for 19 years, and had a rotary fan on the desk of the office behind the coolers that he turned on in summer and left plugged in through winter because the sound helped him think. He watched through the glass until Officer Prentice cinched the 2nd zip tie, and then he walked to the office and sat down at the desk and looked at his phone. He had a number saved under a first name only, Emmett, that he had never called in the 3 years it had been in his contacts. He pressed call. It rang twice. By 9:53 p.m., Tobena Achebe was sitting on a curb in North St. Louis with his hands zip-tied behind him, a worn leather folio 3 feet away in the gravel, and a 140-page compliance review that named 4 officers by badge number sitting inside it, and he was listening to the sound of traffic on West Florissant and the buzz of the light above Pump 4 and Officer Prentice on her radio somewhere behind him, using the language of dispatch, call signs, codes, clipped reference numbers that translated roughly to, "Nothing here matters." He looked at the photograph in his mind because he could not look at it in his hands. Yellow dress. 8 years old. Her name had been Imani Achebe, and she had been the kind of child who organized things by color. A tin on her windowsill, with smooth stones and feathers and seed pods, arranged in bands of brown, gray, white, black. She had been killed by a driver running a red light on a Saturday morning in November 2017, on Kingshee Way, 2 blocks from their house, on the way back from Waffles. She was 16 years old. She had been in the car alone because she had passed her driver's test the previous Tuesday, and she was proud, and he had given her the keys and said, "See you in 20 minutes." He had not talked about Imani to anyone since the spring of 2019. Not because the grief was smaller, but because by then he understood that grief that size does not need an audience. It needs work. The work had taken the following shape. After 17 months in which he did very little, that was not eating or sleeping or sitting at his kitchen window watching the street, Tobena Achebe enrolled in the master's program in public policy at St. Louis University. He already had a law degree from Washington University and 12 years of municipal finance consulting behind him. He finished in 19 months rather than 24, graduated in May 2022 at the back of the room without ceremony, and was retained 6 weeks later by the newly constituted Department of Administrative Oversight as its sole compliance examiner. The position had been created by city ordinance passed that January. It had a mandate that was, on paper, simple, independent compliance review of every department under the city's administrative umbrella, reporting directly to the director. Every department. No exceptions. No advance notice required. He had been working on the Meridian District Review since the previous October. The Meridian District covered the 3rd, 5th, and 9th precincts of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. He had spent 9 months inside the Hall Street Archive and 3 precinct records annexes, reading incident reports, dispatch logs, use of force filings, and internal review correspondence. He had not been given everything he asked for the first time. He had asked again, in writing, citing the enabling ordinance, and the second time the files had come, though not all of them. Section 4 of the 9th Precinct's internal review correspondence had been delivered with 11 pages missing, described in the transmittal as removed for redaction pending legal review. Tobena had written a certified letter to the precinct's administrative captain. 2 weeks passed without a response. He wrote a second letter. This one copied to Emmett Okafor's office and the city councilor's office simultaneously. The 11 pages arrived 9 days after the second letter, in a manila envelope with no cover note, dropped at the reception desk of the Department of Administrative Oversight on a Tuesday afternoon while Tobena was at the Hall Street Archive. He had come back to find them on his desk. He had read them standing up, still in his coat, because he had been looking for these 11 pages for 3 weeks, and he already knew they were the ones that mattered. They were the ones that mattered. They documented the internal review of a specific use of force incident from the previous March, an incident in the 9th Precinct that had been cleared internally in 4 days, a timeline that the administrative policy required to take a minimum of 14. The review file had been signed off by a precinct captain who had, according to his own calendar records, which Tobena had obtained through a separate request 2 months earlier, been on scheduled leave for 7 of those 14 days. The signature was dated during his leave. Tobena had read the page 3 times. Then, he had sat down and added it to Section 4, with a paperclip and a handwritten citation note, and ordered green tea from the restaurant on Del Mar, and kept working. He had read them in a room with a window that faced a brick wall, and a cup of green tea from a bag he kept in his briefcase, and he had written every citation by hand before typing it, the way his first evidence professor at Washington University had required in 1998, and the way he had never stopped doing since. If this story is finding you the way I think it is, subscribe now, because what Tobena carries in that leather folio is something the city's entire chain of command was not prepared to see. He had been on the curb for 23 minutes when a black Lincoln Navigator pulled into the Chevron lot. No rush, no lights. It parked 2 spaces from Officer Prentice's unit and went quiet. A man got out, 67 years old, broad through the chest, a gray overcoat over a dark suit. He was not in uniform. He walked toward the scene with both hands in his overcoat pockets, and the particular unhurried quality of a person who has been in difficult rooms before and knows that arriving loud is what people do when they are not certain they will be heard. His name was Emmett Okafor. He was the Director of Administrative Oversight for the City of St. Louis, appointed by the mayor in 2022 after 26 years in federal municipal law. He had grown up on Natural Bridge Avenue, 4 blocks from the Chevron station, in a house his mother had rented for $340 a month for 22 years. He had known Curtis Beaumont since they were 11 years old, and used to come to this same block for the corner store that used to stand where the station now stood. He stopped 3 feet from Officer Prentice and looked at Tobena sitting on the curb. He looked at the folio in the gravel. He looked at Rick Holton's face. He did not look at Officer Prentice's nameplate, because he had already looked it up in the 40 seconds he spent in his car before walking over. Officer Prentice began to say something, and Emmett Okafor said, "Release him." The words were not loud. They were not a question. They had the quality of something decided before he walked over, which they were. Officer Prentice's expression adjusted toward explanation, and he said, without raising his voice, "Release him now." Rick Holton produced a multi-tool from his belt and cut both zip ties in one motion. Tobena stood up. He shook each wrist once, the way you shake water from your hand, and then walked 3 steps down the curb and picked up the folio. He checked the clasp. He opened it, looked at the cover page, closed it. He looked at Emmett. Emmett said quietly, "How are your hands?" "Fine. The work intact?" "Yes." Emmett Okafor looked at Officer Dana Prentice for a moment. Not with theater, not with fury, but with the careful look of a man who is adding a number to a column he has been keeping for a long time, in a city he has known all his life. "Badge number," he said. She gave it to him. He nodded once, as a person nods when they hear a number they are going to remember. "Go back to your unit." She went. Rick Holton 2 steps behind her. The cruiser pulled out of the lot and turned north on West Florissant without the lights. Emmett watched it go. Then he looked at Curtis, who was visible through the glass, and raised 2 fingers. Curtis disappeared toward the back office. The 3 men sat in the small office behind the coolers with the rotary fan and the red Coleman cooler and 2 mugs of Folgers and a carton of half and half on Curtis's desk. The fluorescent light above them hummed the same frequency as the light above Pump 4. Nobody said anything for a while. The fan made its slow circle. Outside, Marcel Dupuy's Honda pulled off the lot, and the man in the white F-150 started his engine, and the night went back to being what it had been before the cruiser arrived. Traffic, a bus somewhere north, the hum of the lights. By 10:54 p.m., Marcel Dupuy's video had been watched 140,000 times. By 6 a.m. Friday, the number was 890,000. The clip was 4 minutes and 12 seconds long, and it was entirely legible. The second zip tie going on past the click, the folio being kicked, the man sitting on the curb in the gravel, and Officer Prentice's face clearly visible throughout. At 7:41 a.m. The Post-Dispatch ran a digital headline. At 8:03 a.m., the mayor's office called Emmett Okafor's direct line. He let it go to voicemail and returned it at 8:31 after he had read the story. At 9:00 a.m. On Friday morning, Tobena Ashebi walked into the offices of the Department of Administrative Oversight at 1200 Market Street with a leather folio under his left arm. He set it on the conference table, opened it, and placed the Meridian District Compliance Review, 140 pages. Paper clipped in 6 sections, in the center of the table. Then he sat down and waited. The review documented 31 use of force reports in the 3rd and 9th precincts that had been internally cleared without the external review required by administrative policy since 2018. It documented a pattern in incident reports, language that described zip tie restraints as light hand control, language that omitted the movement of personal property from official accounts entirely, language that described subject compliance in terms that bore no relationship to the dispatch recordings Tobena had cross-referenced from the Hall Street archive. It documented time discrepancies between dispatch logs and officer reported arrival times in a specific geographic area of North St. Louis. Discrepancies of 8 to 12 minutes, consistent across a period of 3 years, in the 9 reporting cycles Tobena had examined. It cited primary source documents for every claim. It named 4 officers by badge number across the 2 precincts. Officer Dana Prentice was the 3rd name. Emmett Okafor read for 51 minutes without speaking. He turned pages slowly. He went back to section 4 twice. When he finished, he set the report on the table and looked at the window, which faced east toward the arch and the river, just visible in the morning gray. This holds? Every citation has a corresponding archive source document, all 43 of them. Challenged in discovery? The dispatch logs are city property. They can't be recalled without an administrative process that would take 14 months under the current rules, and the records were already copied during legal access. They're stable. Emmett looked at Tobena for a moment. Not the way a superior looks at a report. The way one man looks at another man when he understands exactly what the work cost. Okay, he said. By 2:30 p.m. That Friday, the Meridian District Compliance Review had been transmitted simultaneously to the office of the city councilor, the mayor's office, and the president of the police board. At 3:15 p.m., the board president called an emergency closed session for the following Monday. At 4 p.m., Officer Dana Prentice received notice that she was on administrative leave effective immediately, pending the board's review of the compliance findings. The notice was printed on Department of Administrative Oversight letterhead. It was signed, as all such correspondence was signed, by the compliance examiner of record. Tobena Akebe. She did not recognize the name on Thursday evening when she was cinching the second zip tie. She would recognize it by the following Wednesday, when the Post-Dispatch ran the full account under a headline that used the word termination. The article named the Meridian District Report and its author. It named the badge number she had given Emmett in the Chevron parking lot. It named West Florissant Avenue and the Thursday at 9:47 p.m. and the 11 people standing outside who had watched. The article ran alongside a photograph of Tobena, taken in the conference room at 1200 Market Street, seated at the same table where the review had been placed Friday morning. He was looking directly at the camera. He was wearing the navy blazer. The handkerchief was in his breast pocket with the white edge exactly 1 centimeter above the cloth. He gave no comment to the press. Not because he had nothing to say, because the document had already said it. 140 pages, 9 months, every claim sourced to the archive, signed by the examiner of record, who had been sitting on a curb in the gravel on West Florissant, while it waited in the folio 3 feet away in the dark. There are people the world has already written a story about. They have looked at the worn blazer and the late hour, and the man sitting on the curb, and told themselves what they are seeing. They have written the conclusion before they asked a question. They have filed the report before the man finished his first sentence. They have fastened the second zip tie because they are certain of what they are dealing with. Certain down to the click. And that certainty is the whole of their error. Not a legal one, though it becomes that too, but a deeper one. They have looked at a man in handcuffs and failed to see the hands. What a person carries cannot be kicked 3 feet down a curb. It cannot be confiscated at a booking desk or dismissed with a call sign on a radio. It does not require a supervisor's approval to remain intact. Some people build their whole lives out of what they carry, out of loss so specific and private that only one person in the world knows its exact weight, out of a daughter in a yellow dress and a winter of barely leaving the apartment, and a decision in the second year of that silence to go back to work and build something that could not be taken by what had already been taken. That kind of strength is not loud. It doesn't require an audience. It folds a handkerchief in 40 seconds every morning and carries a photograph loose between the last section and the back cover and waits for 9 a.m. You can humiliate a person in public. You can make 11 people look away. You can say something in the dark to a woman standing behind you and trust that nothing outside that parking lot will hold you accountable. But you cannot see what someone is carrying. You cannot know what they have survived before you encountered them. You cannot know, with your zip ties and your radio codes and your certainty, that the document that ends your career is sealed inside the thing you just kicked into the gravel, and that the man sitting on the curb in front of you has been building it for 9 months in a room with a window that faces a brick wall, one handwritten citation at a time. Tobena Akebe does not have a large office. He does not have staff. He has a 5th-floor room at 1200 Market Street, a city-issued laptop, and a list of districts still to review. Curtis calls on Sunday afternoons now, and the owner of the restaurant on Del Mar brings the pepper soup out without being asked. He keeps the photograph of Imani in the folio, between the last section and the back cover, because the work is not finished. There are other districts, other reports, other nights somewhere in this city where someone is being told, through a kick and a zip tie and a radio code, that they do not matter, and where the 8 to 12-minute discrepancy in the dispatch log is already being written, right now, by someone who believes it will never be read. He folds his handkerchief every morning. One fold down, one fold across, 1 centimeter above the pocket. It takes 40 seconds. He has not stopped. If what happened to Debena is something you recognize, not just as a story you watched, but as a thing you have carried, leave it in the comments. And not just that you recognize it. Tell me this. If the person who humiliated you on the worst night of your life found out, years later, that you had been holding the authority all along, that you had always been the one who could have ended their career, and they never knew until it was done, would you want them to know who signed it? Or is the quiet enough? Leave your answer below. I want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.